Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Raw Chat live with Tim Mulligan, CHRO of Vulcan and former CHRO of the San Diego Zoo, also CHRO of the year 2016, and my co-author of the Roar book. So we're super excited that you're here with us today. And Tim and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about the Deloitte 2017 Global Human Capital Trends Report. And we started to talk about what is it going to take to stay relevant and thrive in a workplace that's in a dizzying transformation. And what Deloitte says is we're about to face seismic change in the workplace. So Tim and I will take about 30 to 40 minutes to have a conversation, have some questions to ask of him, and then we'll take some Q&A at the end. And to get started, for those of you who aren't familiar, Tim and I had the opportunity to work together at the San Diego Zoo. I consulted with Tim and his HR team for about a 6 to 7 year period on their world famous leadership program and their best place to work strategy. And during that time, I witnessed the incredible transformation that took place at the San Diego Zoo. And in fact, my role was to help transform the culture and get every employee roaring with purpose and passion. And Tim and his HR team just did an incredible job. So we'll start with question number one for Tim, and that is, what was the key to your success at the San Diego Zoo?
I've been warned that when I started, which, I thought the challenge was exciting. I remember when I started, the CEO gave me some great advice, which is just take 6 months to watch and learn. This was a huge company, 2 zoos, conservation, animal hospitals, thousands of employees. So just take 6 months to watch and learn, and then come back with some strategy and changes, which is what I did. So I think key to that was really learning the business and the organization, and then coming back to the team with a real kind of eye-opening plan of where we needed to focus our energies. And so we put together the first of several iterations of a 3-year HR plan. I've just done the same thing here at Vulcan. And that plan, I think, is very instrumental. I can't imagine leading now an HR team in an organization without a prioritized strategic plan that was cutting edge, forward thinking, and best for the organization. And that's what we did at the San Diego Zoo. And I think what really helped was that the first iteration of the plan wasn't focused on the future of HR and best practices and taking us to the next level. We really focused the first 3 years on infrastructure and making sure we had the right infrastructure in place, basic training programs, comp structures that made sense, updating the comp ranges, tackling performance management, making sure we had the right, cascading of goals throughout the organization, so employees knew, where the organization was heading, plus what their role in that was. So we spent several years really just looking at low-hanging fruit and cleaning things up and making sure we had the right infrastructure in place. From there, we could then take the next strategic plan, 3-year plan, and really taking that to the next level. We spent 3 years cleaning house, scrapping everything and starting over. Now we could have fun. And so we focused the next 3 years on becoming an employer of choice. In fact, that was a strategy, was how do we win those awards and how do we become known as an employer of choice? And it's always been a kind of a mantra of mine in HR with my team, is that I don't want to be the HR leader or the HR team or organization that is out there looking at best practices of other organizations. I want to be the team that is creating best practices. So yeah, it's great to see what the competitors are doing and what the landscape is in HR, but what's not happening out there and what can we do that will be eye-opening, exciting for employees, and really set us apart. So we put a plan in place to really focus on how do we become that employer of choice and take us to the next level. So in my time there, we went through several different iterations of the strategic plan: infrastructure, getting your house cleaned up, making sure you had everything in place in terms of your team, structure, all that. Then focusing on the people programs, what things are we not doing yet? And then focusing on the next 3 years and on is next level thinking. Okay, we've got the great programs in place. What do we not have? And that's where we can focus on things like next level thinking and, what are the trends out there? And that's where we can roll out a diversity program, a wellness program, going paperless at a nonprofit organization, making sure we have cutting edge leadership training that no one else is offering, and that's tied to our organization. So I guess to answer your question, Sandy, I'm pretty proud of the work that we did, and I'm sure the team continues to do in San Diego. All of it was very strategically rolled out, very strategically planned and prioritized, and had a real strong strategic plan tied into the organization's strategic plan, but at HR at the forefront of that planning. And I think that's what got us to where we got to be at the San Diego Zoo.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point. It's first to really clean up the foundation and make sure you have all the building blocks in place. And then to keep your eye focused on what's appropriate and relevant for your organization, and strive to look at how can you then be the leader in terms of best practices. And I think sometimes we get distracted looking around us at what everybody else is doing, and what everybody else is doing may not be the right thing for your organization. So I know that one of the great things that came out of the time that we worked together was the writing of the book Roar that we've been talking about for years. And as we got closer to the centennial celebration, we decided, okay, now's the time. And many of you know the book was launched at the time of the San Diego Zoo's 100th birthday. And the Guinness Book of Records was there to record the loudest roar heard around the world. It was really, really fun. So when you and I were chatting last week, you were saying that when you're out talking to your team and people out in the community and other HR professionals, that you're still talking to them about resilience, which really was the main theme in the book that we wrote together. So would you take a minute and say from your perspective, Tim, both from the zoo and Vulcan and just in general, why do you, or how do you see resilience in the workplace of importance? What is it about that you think is absolutely key?
Well, like you mentioned, when we wrote the book, we really wanted to tell the right story. And that story was, it was the centennial of the zoo. And this organization, nonprofit organization, had really, weathered many storms and had been around for 100 years. And what is it that we were doing that at the time of our centennial, which was 2016, we were operating at such high levels, especially in the HR arena, highest guest service scores, highest employee satisfaction scores, highest attendance, all that stuff. So in writing the book, we came up with what Sandy and I thought was a great model, this resiliency model. Now that I'm not there anymore, and I'm at a completely opposite company in Seattle, focused on tech and technology and things that I had never really worked with before, that same model is still relevant. It goes back to, I think, the culture you're creating for your employees and for you to weather the storm. And I guess it's relevant for me in Seattle because it's a very competitive market here for talent. And so what is it that we're doing that's going to make us stand out, stand above the others and stand strong and get the best and brightest people, be an employer of choice in this competitive market and be resilient and rise above. So that's why I think that the resiliency model, the 5-point test, communications and culture and everything else is in there. Emotional intelligence, your employee programs, branding, those are all things I'm trying to employ now at a completely different city, completely different type of company, but yet it's just as relevant for a tech company in Seattle, if that's what you consider us. We have our hands in many different things at Vulcan, to a nonprofit zoo in San Diego. So I think that what's great about the book is that model is configurable to any organization of any size in any industry. And I talked to a group a few weeks ago about resiliency model, and I tied it to recruiting, which is something we hadn't really done, in my 12 years at San Diego Zoo. And it was just as applicable to the recruiting and getting the best candidates as it was to, doing fun programs at a zoo in San Diego. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting in my sort of world of talking about resilience and agility in the workplace, what I'm finding is that the conversation about resilience and corporate agility is really ripening and coming of age. And whereas once people were talking about it in sort of, that would be great, it's a good idea, we don't really understand what it is. I think what the resilience model does is sort of breaks resilience down into a formula and a set of skills. So now anybody can build resilience. It's not a personality trait. It's not a gene you're born with or you're not, but that everybody can develop the right skill set. And I'm really fascinated that you say that you're out there talking about it and attaching it and connecting it to different HR processes. And you know that I'm pretty fanatical about the topic of resilience, and I'm absolutely clear that resilience is the key to any organization's survival, and it's definitely the source of your competitive advantage. And you cannot survive and thrive in this crazy workplace that's going through dizzying transformation without being agile and adaptive and innovative and collaborative and all the things that we talk about in the book. So, which really brings me to the next question, which is question number 2. Oh, I did want to mention, you know, a lot of people have been asking me for a sort of do-it-yourself package on how they can build a resilient team and give people the ideas and concepts and teach them the skills. And I'm super excited. I'm just working on finishing up a new webinar called Raw Stronger that people can actually use inside of their organization to develop their team strength and agility. So if any of you are interested in sort of a do-it-yourself version of implementing the ideas and concepts, many of which that we did at the San Diego Zoo, then feel free to check that out. So question number 2 is, and you refer to this with respect to the recruitment process, what do you see as the number 1 hiring criterion for future leaders? What is it that you're looking for when you're out there hiring the best and the brightest?
Well, that's a great question, something we are wrestling with and dealing with every day here at Vulcan. You know, I don't know about Vulcan, but Vulcan is the brainchild of our owner, Paul Allen, who's known for being an idea person, a genius, and had great success with founding Microsoft and now Vulcan. And we're really trying to hire the best and the brightest people to work for our company, which is dedicated to solving the world's toughest programs using data and technology. So, you know, at Vulcan, we have our leadership competencies. I helped create those in the past year, and we hold people and train people on our leadership competencies. But in hiring, we've been focusing on what's the perfect attribute for the candidates we're looking for. You know, once we get them in the door, we really want to make sure that we can support them in our leadership competencies to be successful. But what kind of attributes are we looking for in a candidate? Our CEO is very passionate about this, and he came out with a list that he thought was very important to get the best and the brightest, and those were creativity, courageousness, courage, and tempo. We work at a very fast pace here, much faster than the pace I'm used to. So creativity, fast pace, but also the one I've been focusing on, I guess to answer your question, would be the courage one. And it's a unique one, I think, for me and for maybe a lot of us in HR. You know, and why courage? Why is that so important to us? Well, we are an organization that takes a lot of risks, that does a lot of great things for the world. And for us, courage means not afraid to take those regular, calculated risks, have the courage and the fortitude to do the right thing, stand up for what you believe in, and not be afraid to fail. In fact, we encourage, failure and to look back on why did something fail, but at least you went on a limb and tried something. And that's actually something we ask about now in interviews to how do we hire for courage? We ask, applicants, give us examples of how you've displayed courageousness in the past and how you stuck your neck out for something and maybe it didn't go well, but you were passionate about it, but at least you showed courage or tenacity. And talk about maybe instead of what I'm used to asking about, which is what's one of your greatest successes at work, talk about one of your greatest failures at work and what your role in that was and what you learned from it. And that's a different way, I think, of getting applicants to talk about courageousness. So we asked specific questions during the interview on courage. We actually have some ratings that for our interviewers, we're training today actually on how to rate for that: courage, creativity, and fast tempo, to make sure our interviewers know what to, what to look for and what to ask. When we do reference checks, we try to focus on examples of courage. And we ask people, when is this applicant how is this applicant and not shying away from difficult conversations? Does he or she often do what's right, even though it's not, what's asked of them or expected of them? And then also from a culture standpoint, to exhibit courageousness is standing up to harassment, bullying, retaliation, things that should not be happening in the workplace. How are these managers, leaders, applicants, how have they stood up to those things in the past and not been afraid to stick their neck out and to exhibit that courage to do so? And that can be tough. Or to challenge poor decisions or leadership instead of ignoring it and challenging it and saying, I wouldn't go that way, I don't feel right about it. And showing the courage to stick your neck out. We train folks on it. We train folks on feedback and listening to tough things and tough conversations, saying what needs to be said, taking action on performance issues instead of letting them fester and go by the wayside, leading change, we're training on that, and to hold yourselves and others accountable. So I guess to answer your question, for us right now, we're really having fun and having good success focusing on courageousness as an attribute, which again is new to me in my kind of repertoire of candidate attributes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm so excited about that. I mean, courage is such a rich topic, and I find myself being asked to speak about it a lot. Actually, I've been invited, I'm super excited, to keynote at the Linkage Women in Leadership Institute. They 1,000 women leaders from some of the world's biggest global brands come together for a 5-day leadership conference. And they've asked me to do a main stage keynote on roar and focusing on courage. And of course, the roar of the lion and everything that stands for, the physiology of it, the sound of it, what it means is also relevant. I'm super excited to hear that you're hiring for courage. And I wonder how many other companies are even considering that as their #1 hiring criterion. And it strikes me that fear is one of the #1 challenges that women face in the workplace, especially. We have an innate tendency to fear risk. It's a neurological or neuroscientific thing. But also I think we have a fear of not being taken seriously, being inadequate, being challenged with managing and integrating work and life. And very often for women in the workplace, a lack of courage or a fear results in sort of withdrawal, maybe over apologizing and feeling like we don't have what it takes to step up to the next level of leadership. So we'll be really curious how your hiring for courage continues to evolve and how that really reshapes your conversation. I think it's a very bold and courageous thing. And I wonder also, Tim, how many companies out there are adding failure to a core competency and as part of a performance management process. In other words, if people aren't failing, then are they being courageous enough? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's interesting. I think back to my career, I spent 20 years in HR-ish so far, and about most of it was in hospitality or, the zoo world. And I don't recall ever encouraging managers or myself to talk about failures and make them a good thing, So this is a new concept for me. I don't know how many companies are doing it. Now that we have embraced it, it seems like a no-brainer, and it's really fun and exciting to talk about, and it encourages risk-taking. But I've made a career of trying to not have failures, and if I've had them in career, I've tried to quickly turn them around and hide it. Here, we're trying to highlight them, and our CEO loves talking about fast failures and lessons learned from failure, more so than hearing someone boast about a great program that went perfect. So I don't know. To answer your question about how many are doing it, I see a trend heading that direction, but it's been a really fun trend to embrace and to put into your culture.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go to the next question. Now that we've spoken about courage and what to hire for with future leaders, let's go to question number 3. And I'm just fascinated by this. I mean, the whole topic of diversity and inclusion is so prevalent right now. And the risk when talking about diversity and inclusion is that it becomes sort of window dressing and band-aid, and that there is, you know, something done, sort of tactical stuff done, but doesn't really address deep down, I'm going to say, the real consciousness and the mindset that's needed. So from your perspective and what you're doing at Vulcan, and I know you're kind of in the early stages of it, what do you think is the game changer, the trim tab that has diversity and inclusion be organically and practically integrated into the culture, as opposed to just being the window dressing and the kind of, we're doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that so that we're seen to kind of be a diverse and inclusive company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a question everyone's talking about. I mean, any HR forum or conference or chat room or whatever it might be you go to, D&I is a big topic. So, you know, in the industry I was in, the zoo industry, I kind of spearheaded with a group a project to set some policies in place and include and train on diversity and inclusion at kind of zoos and aquariums around the country. And then we focused on San Diego Zoo, which was a pretty, like I said, old school, long-standing company. And the thought of a D&I program was a new thing, and there's some kind of nervousness about it. I think that, and at Vulcan now we're planning one here. I don't know if there's one perfect answer, and I've been to many, many conferences about this. I've had many consultants work with, and what it seems to come down to is, you know, there is not a one-size-fits-all D&I template. I wish there was, but that's not how inclusion works, or diversity. I think it's really important to make sure that your organization understands what diversity and inclusion means. And it's, like you said, it's not just you know, race and gender numbers and metrics. That's a good way of judging, you know, the diversity of your staff, but focusing more on creating an environment where anybody can be heard, anybody is encouraged to sit at the table, to feel welcome. And that's the inclusion part, which I think is tougher and more important than just the numbers, you know. So, and so what I would suggest you do, and what we did in my last company, we're doing now, is to focus more on the needs of the individual, not the numbers for the organization. So what does that mean? So for different folks of any different walk of life or slice, you know, whether it's race, gender, sexual orientation, you know, the whole list, but also things like generational, you know, are your millennials fitting in? It's a great thing to do with your internship program, different types of learning and personality types and thinking style. The point is that, are you creating an inclusive environment where multiple voices are heard, multiple thoughts and opinions are considered and valued? And I guess I would just say that from what I found is that you want to come, ideally, a fully rounded, successful D&I program that fits in your culture. There's not any one metric that works, but it's good to look at the turnover, the numbers. But instead, I'd focus more on having multiple solutions in place to monitor and retain a diverse and talented and inclusive workforce. We're focusing on other types of things like mentoring programs and a steering committee versus employee resource groups and training at all levels. And I guess the answer to your question is, I don't think that there's a one size fits all on diversity and inclusion. Every company is unique, but I think as an HR leader and an HR team, you are remiss if you're not tackling this head on and finding a great program for inclusiveness within your own four walls.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Last week I had a lunch with somebody who heads up the diversity and inclusion for Deloitte. And we were having the same conversation, how do you take this from just being about, getting women into leadership, for example, which is sort of a prime topic right now and very important, and be really inclusive and look at all the nooks and crannies of the organization to make sure that everybody's needs are being represented. And one of the things we talked about is that you really need to shift the consciousness of people, and then maybe the underlying game changer for diversity and inclusion is to instill a consciousness of sort of humanity, of that pathos, of really being able to appreciate and understand people, and to come from the point of view that if you look like me and you sound like me and you went to the same college as me, you might be less valuable to me in being innovative and creative and leading than somebody who looks or sounds different, who went to a different school. And we know that that gets into the whole unconscious bias, but to really ingrain that in the cellular structure. And this woman from Deloitte shared with me, and I'm sure many of you have seen it, a Deloitte paper, research paper that I thought was really interesting, and I'll send it out as a link afterwards, and it's called 6 Signature Traits of Inclusive Leaders. And they break it down into the competencies of curiosity, cultural intelligence, collaboration, commitment, courage, there's that courage competency again, and cognizance. And that's that, of course, overcoming that unconscious bias. And I found that to be a really nice model that they've come up with. So I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see some real advances in the world of D&I. We know Deloitte sort of did away primarily with the affinity groups. And so I think everybody's watching to see what's going to happen there. Yeah. So that brings us to our next question, which is question number 4. And one of the things you mentioned is that the talent market is really tight in Seattle and in technology in general, and that for who Vulcan is, you really need to be getting not only the best and brightest, but the most courageous, the most innovative people. So how are you competing in the talent market, and how are you distinguishing Vulcan and standing out from the crowd?
Yeah, I don't have perfect answers for this because it is, as I speak, a challenge. I can tell you what we're doing to handle this. Every company is unique, and for my company that I work for right now, we are not publicly traded. We don't have some of the long-term ownership and equity type benefits and perks that some of our competitors here in Seattle have, like most of them. So, if we have the basic, pay and bonus, let's say, how are we going to get people besides the money? And so we've been focusing on several other things, which is making sure we're, obviously compensating well, but we're focusing more on the experience and giving folks the experience to work on very unique, kind of game-changing projects and activities, and highlighting that in our recruiting. We have a phrase we use at Vulcan, which is #OnlyAtVulcan. We use it we give it away to applicants. We say it every day. I must say it 5 times a day at Vulcan. I'll laugh and say, #OnlyAtVulcan, because we're involved in so many unique things. And so what we focus on is the uniqueness and what makes us different than the others. And look at these experiences you're going to be working on. You're going to have a chance to create this type of drone, or save this type of animal, or work on this type of documentary series, or work for this football team doing this. And so we really try to focus on the experience of it. One challenge we have right now is a lack of kind of brand name recognition on what Vulcan means. It may not be as top of mind what Vulcan's all about. So we're just rolling out a new employment brand campaign and mindset, which is going to actually focus on just that. This is what makes us unique. We have a lot of things we're involved with, and we want to see what makes you unique as an applicant, and join our team, and #OnlyAtVulcan, look at the great things you're going to be doing. We also are focusing on benefits that are unique to others. What are perks and fun things we're offering, and great, not just fun, but valuable things we're offering that aren't about stock options and equity and long-term incentives, but it might be access to different cultural events here in Seattle, or sports tickets, or the things we're doing in our gym with the culture and the workspace, and the transportation benefits that we offer. So we're really making sure we have all this stuff added together just makes for a really, really great experience. So we're focusing on the experience, not on the actual money, let's say, and highlight the awesome projects they're going to be working on, and making sure we're hiring people. And this goes back to the book and the resiliency. We talk in the book about, you know, one of our favorite phrases, Sandy, you and I, is Velcroing people to the why, which, you know, at the zoo is great because we had a very, you know, as a nonprofit, we had a very strong vision and we wanted to Velcro people to that. Here at Vulcan, we're making sure the same thing. It's a little different, but making sure that the folks that are applying to work for us or that we're going after aren't just looking for a paycheck or the chance to work, you know, under Paul Allen, but instead they know all about it. They've done their research. They love what we're about. They have done this world in the tech industry. Now they want to come do something different that's bigger for the world. And so we're trying to Velcro people to our why and making sure that our applicants know what we're about and they want to be a part of it and they're super excited. So we're focusing on more about the experience than the paycheck, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole conversation about Velcroing people to the purpose. And when you and I were talking on the phone last week, I said, you're really smart. You've worked for 2 organizations that have very big, audacious purpose. You know, where the purpose of the San Diego Zoo, ending animal extinction, was very compelling. And the purpose at Vulcan, you know, solving the world's biggest problems, is very compelling. But what I wonder is, what if you work for an organization where you don't have a big, audacious purpose, like the San Diego Zoo or Vulcan? And in a couple of minutes after our next question, we'll open up for Q&A. So for those of you who are on, you might want to open up your chat button. There's a little chat icon at the bottom of your screen. And I hope somebody might ask the question. It all sounds great to distinguish yourself and focus on the experience. But if you don't have really great purpose and you don't really have the capacity for really great experience providing, then what do? So I think that'll be a really, really interesting conversation. And by the way, we'll go another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So if you have a question, get ready to put that in the chat. So let's get to the last question here, Tim. And, you know, when I'm out and about and speaking at conferences and for clients, people are always eager to meet you and talk to you. And they always want to know, you know, what was it that had you be so successful? So we spoke about what had you be so successful at the zoo, and I know you're building up your success track record at Vulcan. If there was one success tip that you could offer to HR leaders to be courageous, to stay relevant, and to continue to build their company's brand so that they are competitive, what would you say?
Well, it's really hard to just say one. I would give you, let me give you my top couple. For me, in kind of my leadership brand and what I think is important for a CHRO, and I'm trying to mentor, you know, my team, a driver of change, and not just change for change's sake, but someone who is able to communicate and influence employees to do change in a positive way. And I also look at it, my role and a CHR role is being a futurist for the company, for the HR and the business. So a strategic driver of change. The second one is a skilled strategist. I can't imagine being a CHRO without being a skilled strategist. In fact, some of the people that I know who have either done it and didn't like it or don't want to take that leap is because that's a lacking skill. And I think it's really important to be capable of thinking and operating strategically, determining how, you know, current actions are going to impact the future and putting that together into a logical plan. Of course, I'm going to throw in 2 others. Business focused. I think it's ever more important that, you know the business, you know the numbers, you drive results, you know what makes teams tick, you can talk the talk. Can I go to a board meeting? Can I go in front of a group and talk about projects that I'm not involved with whatsoever? And that would make me a good CHRO, that I know the business and I know what's driving the business, even though it's not, you know, the HR things. And then I also think the fourth one is being an ace communicator. It's ever more important. You need sometimes you're the face of the company, and you should be able to be one of the most, if not the most skilled communicator, PR manager in the organization. And I think that's where the CHROs that really stand above are the folks that are those skilled communicators, and they can talk to any crowd, social media, something like this, board members, leadership teams, and make those strong business cases to these boards, to CEOs, to executive teams. So I'd say driver of change and futurism, skilled at strategy, a skilled strategist, business focused, and being a pro communicator. Those are my 4 kind of driving forces.
Okay, that's better than just one, for
Thank
sure.
you.
Well, we wanted to open up with some Q&A. We do have you on mute just because if everybody is off mute, it's going to be difficult to take questions. But if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat icon. And we wanted to take some time here and just have you ask some questions. We'll take 2 or 3 questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask Tim or a question you'd like to ask me, feel free to type it in the chat. And while we're doing that, I'm going to just share with you contact information in case you wanted to get in touch with either one of us. So here's the Q&A. Here's my contact information and Tim's contact information and different websites. And I know that both Tim and I love to have these kinds of conversations and talk about roar and courage and resilience. So if you're up for that, you know, feel free to reach out to us because we'd love to dialogue with you. So let's see, do we have any questions in the chat? I don't see any right now. We'll give you a couple more minutes. Tim, while people are thinking about any last questions, anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to just sort of drop in terms of sort of some of the hottest trends or hottest ideas in the world of human capital?
Yeah, I mean, right now I just spent my past year working with the team on a strategic plan for Vulcan's HR team. I think every HR team needs it. And so we're excited for the next 3 years, to focus on a plan for Vulcan. We're focusing on cutting edge technology, of course, and that's a key one. That's an ever-changing world. We're focusing on cutting edge and world-class leadership development and training, and what are our needs here at Vulcan, but also how can we deliver with, you know, online training and in-person training and training our leaders to be coaches and all these things that are really fun to wrap our arms around. We have another team working on D&I. I think is a never-ending, you know, struggle. And then our last team is working on, you know, what's going to set us aside in terms of, you know, supplemental compensation, benefits, pay, and just the whole, you know, financial, you know, and cultural part of that. So, but one thing, Sandy, I wanted to mention was you asked a really good question about Velcroing to the why. You know, when I spent 12 years at the San Diego Zoo, and I definitely was not looking to leave. I loved it. But when I got kind of headhunted for this job, what got me to leave was being Velcroed to the why. So the recruiter did a really good job in selling me and educating me on all the things that Vulcan was doing as a business, but also just things that are not related to the core business, but what were they doing for the community, and what was their company's social responsibility and things like that. I think is where you can, if no matter what your industry is, if you're a for-profit, nonprofit, whatever, you're going to want to have applicants who do have that Velcro to the why. And so if you're selling a widget or whatever it might be, that's fine. But what else are you doing? What are you doing in the community, for your employees, for the better of the world, for whatever it might be? And that's where you can get really creative and say, yeah, our business is selling this thing or doing this thing, but on the back end for our employees, look at all these great things we're doing for the community, for the city, for the industry, for our employees. And that's where you can really Velcro people to the why, I think. And so there's a lot of fun that anyone can have with that topic.
You know, it's interesting. Of all the things that I speak about when I'm out speaking, that's the sort of idea that is the most sticky for people. And people typically, you know, will come afterwards and have a conversation with me. And when I say what really resonated, they'll say Velcro. I'm calling it Velcro to your purpose. There's something about when people are Velcro when you Velcro to your purpose and to your why, you can bear it anyhow. In other words, when you're Velcro to a purpose that's compelling for you and it is heartfelt for you, then you can put up with conditions that you typically wouldn't. But when people, and we've spoken about this a lot, Tim, when people are disconnected from their purpose or your organization's purpose, like two pieces of Velcro pulling apart, that's when they disengage, they lose focus, they stop contributing, they won't be courageous, they won't take risk, they're not looking to add value. And then that's when they leave. And then if that were bad enough, then they tell their friends why your company isn't a great place to work. So there's something about being able to articulate your company's purpose, whatever the purpose is, big, small, hairy, or audacious, and then to communicate in a way that's very compelling for people. And I think the point you made about how you got recruited away from the San Diego Zoo, I mean, who would ever have thought you would have given up a position of CHRO of the world famous San Diego Zoo? But obviously there was something about the purpose of Vulcan, and then of course something, everybody wants to grow and evolve and step into something bigger and more creative. So if there was one takeaway for people from our talk today, maybe that would be one concrete actionable takeaway, is to really start examining with your leadership team is, what is the purpose of your organization? What is the reason for your existence? What gets employees out of bed in the morning with a roar of purpose and passion? And how can you continue to breathe life into that messaging in a way that it makes people's hearts beat? Because it's not just cognitive, you know, it's something that really becomes heartfelt for people. And I think when you crack that, when you've got that figured out, that's when you're on a pathway to world famous, best place to work, and really attracting great talent. So we'll wrap up here, and I wanted to say thank you, Tim, so much for taking this time and sharing your ideas. I know for me it was really stimulating. If any of you have any feedback, feel free to type it in the chat. But I see a couple of comments here, and I think that people have really been stimulated to start thinking differently. And I will send out a link to this recording so that you can share it with others and spark a conversation amongst your HR team, your leadership team, about what it's going to take to thrive and stay relevant. So look for an email. I'll also send the article on the 6 traits of inclusive leaders and a couple of other things that might be of interest to you. And thanks for making the time. Thanks for joining us. And Tim, thanks so much. We wish you lots of success.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing how world famous Vulcan becomes.
I hope so.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks.
I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath.